Let's build a full-featured real estate site using WordPress and Breakdance. My name is Elijah, and in the next 60 minutes, I'm going to show you how to do exactly that. In today's video, we're going to build this beautiful, full-featured real estate website. You can see the home page we're going to end up with here, with a beautiful header and footer. We're also going to end up with a properties archive with a listing of our properties and some filters courtesy of Gridbuilder WP. You can see we can choose for sale and see only the properties that are for sale, or swap to for rent and see the rental properties, or we can see the sold properties. All of these cards are custom built, and I will show you how we're going to build those here in just a minute. And then we have our agents page, which shows all of our real estate agents, which are registered as a custom post type, and each one has their own contact form, which will route the email to them. Finally, we have our contact page with just a standard contact form. So we're going to jump into building this in just a moment, but if you want to save a little bit of time, check the video description for some InstaWP links. You'll find one for a blank site, which will allow you to build this along with me from scratch, and then one link that will start you off with the completely built site, and you can jump straight into customization. With all that said, let's jump over to our new WordPress install and get started. We are going to need a few plugins here, so let's start installing those. The first one we'll need is code snippets, so we'll add code snippets from the WordPress repo, and let's go ahead and drop that in. This is optional. If you have another method you prefer to use to add custom code to your site, you can use that instead, but this is going to be necessary for making our Google Maps work with advanced custom fields. And speaking of advanced custom fields, let's go ahead and add that in next. So let's click upload, and I'm going to go ahead and drop it in. Click install now, and here in just a moment, we'll go ahead and activate it. Let's get that fired up here. Now, I do want to note that the only pro feature from advanced custom fields that we're actually using is the gallery field for the individual property listings. So if you don't need a gallery field, you can totally get away with using the free version of advanced custom fields. The next thing we're going to need is Gridbuilder WP. So let's go ahead and upload that, and we'll go ahead and activate it. And finally, we're going to need Breakdance. So let's upload that, install, and activate. Now I'm just going to go through and plug in all my license keys for all these plugins so that we can get started. So now everything's activated and updated. And I want to note here that the 4 plugins you see installed are all we're going to need for this site. And in the case of advanced custom fields, as I noted before, you may not even need the pro version if you're willing to forego the gallery field. And WP Grid Builder is kind of a nice add-on, but isn't 100% necessary. If you want to have filtering for your properties, you're going to need something like this to filter the property listings on the front end. But if you're willing to leave filtering off, you don't need WP Grid Builder either. So this is a very lean stack to build a real estate site on top of. Now let's jump into kind of our back-end setup with our post types. So let's go to ACF and post types. And we're going to add a new post type. And this is going to be pretty basic. We're just naming our post type properties, property, and property for the post type key. We're going to add a taxonomy to this post type here in a minute, but for now, we do need to make one tweak in the advanced configuration for any of the post types we're going to use in this tutorial. So we'll go to URLs, and under here, we need to make sure we turn on the archive. And for the archive slug, we'll use properties. So then when we go to our website /properties, WordPress is going to know to query the property post type. So let's save that. And we're going to need a post type for our agents as well. So we can actually just duplicate this one because all we need to do is change the settings to make sure it's called the right thing. So we'll do agents, agent there for post type key. And then under URLs, just make sure our archive slug is agents instead of properties. Let's save that. Next, we want to set up a taxonomy for our properties. This is going to be used to tag our properties with locations, which allows us to filter properties by location on the front end. So we'll go to taxonomies and we'll add a new one, and it'll be called locations. Singular will be location, and then the taxonomy key, we'll leave it at location. We do want to make sure we choose our property post type here under post types, and then we do want to turn on hierarchical, and that'll be it for our taxonomy. This gives us this locations option under our properties, and we'll be able to nest the locations within each other so we can have like state, county, town, township, whatever kind of hierarchy we need. And it'll give users a really nice experience when they're looking for specific properties in specific areas. Okay, so we've got our post type set up and our taxonomy set up. So now we need to add some fields to our custom post types. Let's add a field group here, and this is going to be property fields. And the first thing we're going to add is an agent field, or in fact, listing agent. And the field type is going to be relationship. So we can just search for that. And this is going to allow us to link properties to specific agents, which will be helpful later on. Let's go ahead and make sure it only shows the agent post type. And then for filters, all we need is the search. Now let's add another field here. We're going to need our gallery field. Let's go ahead and choose gallery from the field type dropdown. We're going to call this images, and the field name will be automatically populated. That's perfect. We want to return the image array, and we'll leave the library option at all. Now let's go ahead and add our address field, which is kind of interesting because we're going to use a Google Maps field. So let's look for map and drop that in. Let's call it address, and that's about all we need for that field. Now, what this will allow you to do on the back end is pick the address on the map or type in the address and have it shown on a map so that you know you're kind of picking the right address. This will give us some cool options. Next, we're going to need a status field. This is going to let us designate a property as sold, for sale, or for rent. So we're going to use the select field here. And for the field label and name, we'll use status. And then the choices, we're going to need a couple of options. Rent, which will be shown as for rent in the dropdown. Sale, shown as for sale. And then sold, which will be shown as sold. This string to the left of the colon is the actual value that will be available in the code. And to the right of the colon is the label for that option. So this left-hand value is what we can use in our conditions and things like that to show these badges on the property listings. Next, we're just going to need a bunch of number fields. So let's add a field. We'll call this one price. And let's swap the type to number. And we are going to set this to be prepended with a currency symbol. Now let's add a new one called bedrooms. Again, this is a number field, and we'll call it bedrooms. Now we'll need to just duplicate this a couple of times for bathrooms, square footage, and acreage. So let's duplicate, duplicate, and duplicate, and then we just go through and rename these. I think I might have one extra there, but that's okay. We'll call it bathrooms, bathrooms, square footage for this one. Make sure you update both the field label and the field name. And then acreage. So we'll do acreage, acreage. And you can add minimum and maximum values to these if you want, but I don't think that's necessary for what we're doing here. Let's remove that last field we didn't need. And that should be all the fields we need for our property post type. Let's go ahead and save this. Now I do want to add some fields to our agents, such as a phone number and email address. So let's create another field group. We'll call it agents, fields. And our first field will be a plain text field. We'll call this phone number. And our second field will be an email address. So let's see if we have an email field. We do. Drop that in and call it email. And let's go ahead and save those changes. Now, one thing we need to do is we need to make sure these groups are assigned to the proper post type, which I definitely did not do on the last field group. So let's do it here first. We're going to go down to settings, location rules. And we're going to show this field group if the post type is equal to, not post, but agent, and save that. Then let's jump right back over to our property fields and do the same thing, but make sure that it's pointing at post type of property. And let's save that. Now I'm just going to import some of my properties and agents that I've already created to save us a little bit of time, but I'll show you what those look like once they're set up. Okay, so I've got some properties and agents imported, and I'll show you what those look like on the back end. But first, let's take a look at the one snippet we're going to need for this particular setup, which is a snippet that allows you to add the Google Maps API key for ACF to use. So let's go in here, and you can see it's just about 5 lines. I got this directly from the Advanced Custom Fields website, and I'll make sure that this is available in the video description as well. Now let's take a look at our agents. So let's jump over here. I have 3 agents, and if we click into one, we can take a look at the custom field setup. Basically, all we have is a featured image over here, a phone number, and an email, and that's the same for all of our agents. Properties are a little bit more interesting, so let's jump into here. I have some random fake addresses for the property titles, but each one does have a description. We've associated it with a listing agent, a featured image, and if we scroll down, we also have a gallery with 3 images. And then here's our ACF maps field. Now, because I used fake addresses, this doesn't match the title of the post, but in a real world site, it certainly would. And this allows you to kind of designate a map location for this property. Our status is for sale. We can choose for rent or sold also. We've put in a price, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and acreage. So all of our properties and data are set up. Now we can jump into our Gridbuilder WP setup. So in our admin menu, we'll see Gridbuilder WP, and let's go to Facets. And we're going to create a number of facets here. We're going to create one for the price, of course, the status, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, acreage, and one for location. This is what gives our users the ability to filter our properties very specifically on the front end. So let's go ahead and set up our location facet because it's kind of the most unique one out of all the ones we're going to be setting up. We'll call it location, and then the title, we'll say location/area, and then we need to do some things under behavior. We're going to keep the filter action and the filter type as checkboxes. And then under taxonomy, we need to choose our locations taxonomy. We're going to set the logical combination to or. We're going to turn on hierarchical and make sure navigation tree view turns off. And the rest of these should be good at default. So let's go ahead and save that. This is going to give us those checkboxes for our locations to filter our properties. Let's go back and add a new facet here. The rest of these are mostly going to be about the same because most of them are numerical values, or maybe all of them, besides our status. So we're going to be doing filter for our facet action, but then on any of the numerical values, we'll be doing a range slider. So let's choose that. And then our data source is actually going to be a custom field. It will be a post field. And then we're going to look for our custom field. In this case, let's do acreage. And it should pop up and show you that ACF property field, acreage right there. And that should be all we need for pretty much all of our numerical fields. So let's go ahead and add a few of those. Go back and add a new one. And it looks like I forgot to name this. So let's jump in here and make sure I name it acreage, acreage, and acreage. Save that. And let's drop in a couple more of those. So we have square footage. So let's create that one. Do square footage. And then go into behavior. And again, we're going to be doing a range slider, custom field, post field, and then we're going to search for square footage to find that ACF square footage field. Everything else should be fine at default for this one as well. Let's jump back, create a new one. This time we'll do bathrooms. So let's name that, make that plural there. Jump over to behavior. Same thing as before, range slider, custom field, post field, and then bathrooms. Pick that field, save. Now we need one for bedrooms. So let's jump back here, add a new one. Bedrooms for the name, behavior, range slider. And you can see there are a lot of other options here that you could use if you had different types of properties, such as rating, color picker. We'll use drop down here in a minute, buttons, lots of different things you could do here. But because we're dealing with just linear numerical values, we don't really need any of those options. Let's find our field again. We're doing bedrooms, I believe. So bedrooms, perfect. Let's make sure I'm right. Yeah, bedrooms. So we selected the right field there. Let's save that. And now we're going to do a price slider. So this one will be pretty much the same as the other ones we've set up that used a range slider, but we'll name it price. And then over here on behavior, we're going to do the same thing, choose our custom field, but we do want to prefix this with our currency symbol, which in this case is a $, and save that. Now for our final facet, we are going to create a status drop-down option. So let's create a facet. Let's call this property status, and let's go to behavior. This time we're going to choose drop-down instead of range slider, and we're going to use custom field again. Let's type status into our search box here and choose that ACF status field. For logical combination, we want to be able to combine searches for statuses, so we'll choose or, and we'll enable multiple selection. This will let you filter the properties based on multiple statuses, so you could look for both sold and for rent, or sold and for sale, or for rent and for sale, any combination of statuses. And I believe that will do it for our facet setup. So let's go back and just look through all the facets we just created. Basically, we've created a facet for each custom field that we created on our posts. So this will allow us to create that advanced filtering sidebar on the front end. So I think that about covers all the nitty-gritty kind of data backend setup stuff. Now we can jump over to our Breakdance global blocks and set up a few global blocks for use in our design. We're going to need 3. We're going to need a property card, which will be used in our design listings, an agent card, which will be used to display our agents, and then we're going to need 1 card that we're going to use as kind of an interstitial call to action within our property listing loop. So let's go ahead and start with the property global block, because we'll base the other global blocks kind of loosely on this block itself. So we'll call this property block and click add global block. Now let's open this up in Breakdance and get to editing. Now throughout this build, we will be using a design set, which is actually a real estate focused design set. And it includes a global block that I want to base my blocks off of. So I'm going to go down here to define real estate, find the global blocks page, and I'm going to add this top one to the page. This will be kind of the basic structure of our property. We are going to need to adjust the structure a little bit. Let's move this div out of the container and delete the container. Since we're in a global block, we don't need a container. We just need our div here. Now we'll need to start styling and adding some dynamic content in. You'll see here that our image is already pointed at the featured image. So if we swap to one of our properties here, let's just search for cedar. And here's one of our properties. So let's drop that in and you'll see that the featured image does change. So that is set up dynamically. Now we want to have a little badge that shows the property status. So we can actually use this property type text here to start with. The first badge I want to create is a sold badge, which will show if the status is set to sold. So let's go over here and adjust the styles a little bit. I know I want my typography to be kind of in line with my brand colors, and you can see that we don't have any global colors right now. That's because our design set isn't fully imported. So what we can go ahead and do is go back to our library here and click Import Global Settings. This is going to go ahead and move in all of our global colors and settings to make sure everything looks nice and consistent. And you can see immediately that this card starts looking much better. So now that that's done, we can actually go back to here and let's duplicate this because we're going to need 2 instances of this. One is going to say sold. And we do want to give this one a different color. So let's go over here to our advanced settings and go to wrapper, background, and let's adjust that to more of a pale yellow version of our brand color. And since we might use this a few other places, we can go ahead and save that. Click save, and that'll make that more reusable for us later. Now we want to go back over to our typography settings. And again, we're going to grab this accent color and create a slight variation. probably don't want it quite that dark, but something like that looks pretty good. Again, we can save this in our global colors to make it easy to reuse, but I don't think we're going to need this color again. If I'm wrong, we can always come back and grab it from here and then save it to our global colors. So that's our sold badge. Now we need a badge for the for sale or for rent status. Now, if you remember from when we set this field up, the status field for the properties, the value is going to be sold, sale, or rent. So if it's set up as for sale, all we're going to get via dynamic data is sale. So we need to adjust for that. So here's how we're going to do that. Let's go up here to our text input and click our dynamic data icon, and we're going to choose our status field. Now you can see it's outputting sale right now, but we want to put a word before that, for. So all we need to do is click our little badge here for our status dynamic data and go to advanced, and under prepend, put for. And we're also going to need a space to make sure that it's not all lumped together. So as soon as we add that space, you can see that it shows for sale. So if this property was for rent instead, it would say for rent. Now, why didn't we do dynamic data for our sold badge? Well, that's because we're going to show and hide these badges depending on the status of the property. And because I wanted different colors for the sold badge versus the for sale or rent badge, it makes sense to have them be separate elements. So let's go ahead and apply some conditions here. So I'm going to select the sold badge, and let's go over here to our settings tab, conditions, and edit conditions. We'll click add condition, and we're going to choose dynamic data, which if you just hit D after you open the dropdown, it's going to bring up the dynamic data dialog. And we're going to grab that status field again. And we want to show this if the status field is sold. Remember, the value of this field is all lowercase, so we'll need to make sure that we're checking for a lowercase value of sold. So let's apply that condition. Now we need a condition to show this badge only if the status is not sold. So let's repeat those steps. We'll go to settings, conditions, edit conditions, add condition, click the dropdown, hit D, choose status, and then swap this middle portion here to is not, and then we'll put in sold. So now these two badges should never be shown at the same time, and they should be shown appropriately depending on the status of the property. Next up, we need to continue populating dynamic data, but these next operations are a little simpler. So for this text, we simply need to click our dynamic data icon and go look for our address field, which is here, and that will drop the address in from our Google Maps field. Now we need to make sure that this text is appropriate and pulls its value from our custom fields. So let's go up here to our first item in our icon list, and let's replace this text with dynamic data. So we'll choose bedrooms, which should give us a number, but we also want to add the word bedrooms after that. So let's click our dynamic data badge here, go to advanced, and we need to append bedrooms. Now again, there's no space, so we need to add that ourselves to make it look a little bit better. And then we need to do the same thing for the bathroom item in the list. So let's go here, dynamic data, choose bathrooms, and then go into our advanced dynamic data settings and append space bathrooms. Now we're pulling this information dynamically so this card will display correctly for all of our properties. Finally, we need to display the price based on the price field that we set up. So we're going into dynamic data again and choosing price. Now we'll need to add a $sign here. So we'll go to our dynamic data settings and prepend with our currency symbol. Perfect. The last thing we need to do is make sure that our view details button is pointed at the post permalink, which it is. But if it weren't already, you could click the dynamic data button and choose post permalink. So that should be all we need for our property card, which is going to be used to show our property listings on the property archive. So let's save that and let's jump back to global blocks. So we'll hit the X icon and exit to WordPress. Next, we're going to create our agent card, which is going to be based loosely on the property block. So let's open the property block up, and then let's add our new block here in this tab, agent block. Let's go ahead and click add global block, and we'll edit that in Breakdance. Now we have two tabs up, but all we're going to do over here is simply grab the div that contains all of our elements, hit Command or Control C to copy them to our clipboard, close this tab out, and then Command or Control V to paste them here. This effectively duplicates our property block for us to use as a starting point. Now let's go ahead and preview one of our agents. Click that to see our dynamic data from that agent. And all we're going to need from this, we're definitely not going to need the badges or the bedrooms and bathrooms or the price. So all we're going to need to keep, I think, is the actual address text, which we're going to swap to the post title. We'll get rid of our badges here, keep the image, get rid of the icon list, and get rid of this div here entirely. So that gives us just a basic card. But now I want to do something a little bit more interesting here and throw in an advanced accordion element, because I want a little contact agent dropdown in this card, and the advanced accordion is the fastest way to achieve that. So we only need one accordion content element, so we'll get rid of the other ones. We'll select the remaining one and rename this to something like contact agent. And we don't actually want that background color here, so let's get rid of that. We can just click the X here to clear that out. And we do want a contact form in this accordion. So let's add a form element, drop that in, and then get rid of the other elements in there. Now we can select our form and start modifying this. Now let's go ahead and get rid of the name field because we want to reduce friction as much as possible for people to contact this agent. But we do want a way to kind of let an agent know that they were contacted personally. So there are a couple of things we can do. You might not need to do both, but I'm going to show you both options just in case one works for your use case and one doesn't. So in the form builder, we can add a field with the type of hidden, which will let us use information in our form submissions without necessarily bothering the user. So one use case could be a hidden field. We can name this ATTN agent, and then under advanced, we can actually set the value of this field to the post title, which will be the title of our agent that we're viewing. This can then be used in the submission, either in the email subject line or somewhere else, to make sure the agent knows that they've been contacted personally. Another thing we could do here, assuming you aren't opposed to exposing the agent's email visibly, is you could add a field here, choose email, change the label to agent email, and then under advanced, you could pre-populate this with the email field from our agent post. This serves two purposes. First, it makes the email visible for the visitor in case they just want to contact the agent outside of this form, but it also allows us to use this in our actions. So if we go to email, we could change the to email to our agent email. And of course, you need to get rid of this other content here. That actually automatically routes the email for you. Otherwise, if you didn't want to use the agent email field, you could just use the ATTN field that we created, the hidden one, to make sure that the subject line has the agent's name in it, new inquiry. You could then use your email system to kind of tag and route these as needed. So there are a few different options in how to configure this form to be kind of customized to the agent. We'll leave both of those options active here. And let's go ahead and change our submit text to contact agent. And because this is real estate and most of the real estate agents I've dealt with like to be very available, we'll also want to list their phone number here in this area somewhere. So let's add an icon list because it will give us a good option to show a little phone icon next to the phone number. And in fact, we could show their email address here as well. So let's change the text to the agent's phone number. and then change the icon to a phone. Something like this should work. And then we'll do the same thing down here. We'll choose email and we'll change the icon to the classic envelope. And actually, I don't like that icon, so let's swap it out for something like that. Perfect. So now all their contact information is located here in this nice little accordion. And you'll be able to see how that looks once we use this card in a post loop builder. So let's save this and jump back to WordPress. And let's create our final card, which is actually going to be a static card. So let's add a global block and we'll call this Contact Us Block. And click add. Now let's go ahead and edit that in Breakdance. Now we don't really need much from our other element, but I would like to remain somewhat consistent. So we'll set it up using the same settings for our outer div. Primarily, we want to make sure our border radius is the same, which I believe it was 24 pixels. And our padding needs to be set to about 15 pixels. And then we want width to be 100% and min height to be 100%. Now for our background, we're going to use a darker color, probably our primary dark. And we need a big icon right in the middle. So we'll choose icon. And let's change this to a house. Something like this should work nicely. We're going to need to change its color. Of course, we'll choose our accent color here and increase the size quite a bit. Let's actually go to 128 pixels here. Now let's just add a simple text element. Make sure our typography is a good color for this background. We'll just choose white and we'll change the text to say something that will encourage the user to contact us. So we're ready to make your property dreams come true. Then we need to add a button. So let's drop in a button here and this will be pointed at the contact page. And let's just make the button say contact us. Now for the final touches, let's select the div, make sure our layout has everything kind of in the middle, and then let's add a gap of say 16 pixels or so. In fact, let's bump that up a little bit to maybe 20 pixels. Perfect. Now this can be used intermittently in our post listing loop, and I'll show you how to do that here in a moment. For now, let's jump back and make sure we have all of our global blocks set up. We've got our property block, our agent block, and our contact us block. The property block and agent block are both all set up to use dynamic data, so they're ready to go. Next up, we're going to jump over to headers and go ahead and create a quick site header. After that, we'll create our footer, and then we'll be able to dig deeper into kind of the bigger design projects of this site. So let's go ahead and click add header. We'll name our header header, and then we're going to apply the header everywhere, and we don't need any conditions. Let's add the header, and let's edit this in Breakdance. Now we're going to be able to use our library again here, so let's open that up, go to Divine Real Estate, and you can see the header right here. But I don't actually want the overlay version, so let's go to something like this and grab this version of the header. And we'll make sure that it's not set to overlay. You can see there are no settings there under that section. And we just need to adjust our links. We only need a few of them, so we'll get rid of all but 3. And it will be home, properties, and agents for the last link. Let's make sure those URLs are correct. /agents for that one, and /properties for this one. Let's check our home link. We'll just do a single /, and then let's check if our logo is linked. It is not, but we probably want to go ahead and link that to our home page as well. The last thing we'll need to do here is change our button a little bit. We'll change it to say contact us, and then we'll link to the contact page. So that's our header. Let's jump back and create our footer really quickly. Back to WordPress, go to footers, add a footer, and we'll call it footer. Apply everywhere, no conditions, no priority changes. Let's go ahead and edit that in Breakdance. Now again, we'll use our library to speed things up. Go to library, choose the correct design set, Divine Real Estate, and then you'll find that there's a footer on all of these pages. We can just add that in here. Now there's a little bit of an overlap situation up here. That's why this looks to be going off the screen, but it'll look absolutely perfect on our actual pages. We're not going to mess with the footer a whole lot, but you would need to change out these links and any text, social media links. Make sure the form is pointed to the right location under actions. Make sure it's sending an email, all that kind of setup stuff. But since that's not a very interesting part of this tutorial, I'm going to gloss over it a little bit and we'll move on to the next portion. Let's exit to WordPress. Now we get to dive in to designing our properties archive, which is probably one of the more interesting parts of building any real estate site. So let's go to templates and let's add our first template, which will be a post archive. But we don't want to apply this to blog posts. So let's choose settings, click continue to acknowledge we know what we're doing here. Let's change it to property archive. And let's change the location to archive, post type archive, and then add a condition here. We want to use this template if the post type is properties. And we can go ahead and save that. Now let's jump into editing this template. We're going to go ahead and grab kind of a starter layout from our design library. Again, we're using Divine Real Estate. Let's look at the by page here. This looks about right, but we don't want all of these sections, I don't think. Let's go ahead and drop in this big hero image. That looks pretty good. Then we need a section to show our properties. So let's jump back over there and find the one with our post loop builder here. So let's drop that in and then simplify a little bit. We don't need any of this stuff up here. You could leave it if you wanted, but for this particular design, I want to simplify. Let's get rid of this. Let's change this to say properties, and we'll say click your home. We can actually add a little bit of text below that too if we wanted to. A little bit of lorem ipsum. Let's shorten that down quite a bit. We don't need quite so much. And then let's grab this container that all of these elements are inside of and make sure everything is centered. And we might even be able to simplify even a little bit more here and just drop that straight into the section. Then let's make sure everything's centered in the section here. And we can get rid of this div. Now we have our post loop builder here, which isn't showing anything yet because we haven't adjusted the query. Now we could keep some of these other sections if we want, but I don't think we need them because we're going for a very clean and simple design here. So I might keep this one. Let's hang on to that for now and get rid of everything below that. We could actually change that to a call to action to have them contact us. So let's do book a tour, view one of our beautiful homes today, and then do contact us on this button. I kind of like the look of that, so let's stick with that for now. Let's go up here and choose our post loop builder, and let's choose our property block here. And then we want to make sure that our query is correct, which it probably is not right now. We want to edit this query and make sure our post type is the proper post type, and let's apply that. And actually, I just made a mistake there, but this is something that is a good teaching moment. Because we're actually on a WordPress archive, we never really want to use the custom query option because WordPress already has a query for us that returns our property posts. So we don't want to override that. So in fact, what we want to do here is we want to actually clear the query out, which results in all of our properties showing as expected. And you can see our property card looks beautiful. We see all of our dynamic data. Let's go ahead and add some space below this text. We're going to go over to the design tab, go to spacing, and just add something like 40 pixels to the bottom. Now, one thing I do want to do is put these cards here in a columns element. So let's add a columns element because we want our filtering options to be alongside our post loop. So let's drop the post loop builder into that right-hand column. And we're probably going to have to adjust the layout here. We'll probably do 2 cards. So let's select our post loop builder and go to design list. Layout is grid. That's fine. Let's do 2 items per row. And that looks pretty good. Now let's make sure our column width is kind of correct. I think I want this column to be a little bit more narrow. So let's bump that down to say 30%. Now let's go over to our post loop builder, and you remember that static call to action card that we created? We're going to actually inject that in this post loop. So the way we do that is we go back over to our repeated block and we go to advanced and add a static item. So we choose our contact us block and then we choose a position. We'll do 4 maybe. And you can see that it popped it in right there. We have some design issues here that we can correct in a moment, but that dropped it in just about perfectly. So now we can kind of adjust things to make sure that we're showing a good number of posts per page. So right here, we're showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 properties and 1 static card. And the way we adjust the number of properties shown on an archive is actually in the WordPress settings. So let's jump back to WordPress here. I'll keep this tab open so we can return to it quickly. Let's go to settings, reading, and you can see that it's going to show 10 posts on blog pages, which includes our properties archive. Let's change that to 5. Now you want to keep this in mind when designing any archive on the site. 5 posts is going to be the most that it's going to show unless you tweak the query, which you really shouldn't in most cases. So with that done, let's jump back over here and we can save and refresh this archive. And you'll see that our post loop builder now accommodates these property listings much more attractively. We do need to fix a design issue on this CTA card. So let's go to advanced, find our static item here and hit edit global block. And that's going to bring us right over here. All we need to do is make sure that everything is aligned to the middle vertically, and then we'll be good to go. So let's do that. And then we can jump back over to our property archive using the quick navigator. And you'll see that our design is going to be shaping up quite nicely now. The last thing you'll want to do is make sure you have pagination enabled. For this, we'll stick with basic numbers, but you can use any of our available options here. And then we want to enable Gridbuilder WP because we will be adding some facets for filtering these listings. Now you'll notice our built-in pagination went away. That's because Gridbuilder WP kind of does some work on this post loop here, but you can add pagination using Gridbuilder WP if you want to. Let's jump over here to our left column and start dropping in some of our facets. So let's add, and we'll just type facet, and you'll see the Gridbuilder WP facet element right there. All we need to do is select our facets. So let's start with location. Let's duplicate that, and then let's choose property status, duplicate, and choose price. And we'll just go through this and do this for each one of the properties that we want to filter our list based on. So bathrooms, duplicate that, and let's do square footage. And finally, let's do acreage. Let's go ahead and save that. And speaking of pagination, we did not create a pagination facet, so we probably will want that. Let's jump back to WordPress and do that really quickly. Let's head over to Gridbuilder WP and facets, and let's add a new one. We'll call this pagination, and go over to behavior, and we'll choose load, and we can do pagination, load more, etc. For this, we'll just do pagination and keep it quite simple. Let's save that. And then we can jump into here and drop that facet down here below our post list. So let's add a facet again, and we'll choose our pagination facet. Let's save that and take a quick look through the rest of our property archive design. Looks pretty good. Let's make sure our spacing is okay here. Let's add a little bit more space below this columns element to let everything breathe. So let's go over here to spacing and then go into container and set some margin bottom. We've been using 40 pixels, so we'll do that to be consistent. Save that. And then let's go ahead and take a look at this on the front end. And you can see here, we've got this nice hero image. And if we scroll down, we're going to see our property listings. Now I see I've forgotten to do one thing, which is quite important, and that's remove this other post loop builder here, which we're not actually using. The Gridbuilder WP facets can get a little confused if there are multiple post loop builders with the way that I've set this up. So we have to make sure that there's only one on this page, and then we can refresh and we'll see those filters in action. So here we go, we scroll on down and now you can see all of these facets populated. And we should see pagination down here, which we only have one more page to look at. And we can of course customize this to make it look a little bit better. In fact, let's see if we can swap it to navigation buttons. That might look a little bit better. Let's save that and refresh over here and go down. I do like the buttons, but I also want to get rid of that label. So let's jump over here to our label or the facet title and just clear that out. That is optional. So now if we refresh, we should see something much, much cleaner. As you can see here, we just have the next button. But on the left-hand side, we have our filtering options. We can choose which location we want to look at. So let's choose outskirts in Houseville. And that's going to show us our houses that are listed in that area. We have sold and for rent. So let's filter this to only things that are for rent. And as you can see, we can whittle this down based on multiple filters. Let's go ahead and choose Dusk County as a whole. Let's remove the property status filter here. And then we can adjust by price. We can adjust by number of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, so on and so forth. And you can see that the available options in each filter changes depending on the previous filter. So because there are only 4 bathroom homes with these specific criteria that have been selected, only 4 bathrooms is available. So we can go ahead and reset those filters and see the entire list as well. Let's clear this one and clear our price filter. So this gives your users a great experience when looking for properties and gives you a lot of high-end filtering options, the kind that you'd see on a huge major real estate agency website. You can build fairly easily with Breakdance and the help of Gridbuilder WP. So that about covers our property archive, but we have a couple other things to build out. So let's close this facet tab down. Let's close the front end down and let's jump back to WordPress and get started on the next portion of this site. So now let's do our agents archive, which should be pretty quick. We'll just create another post archive. We'll edit our settings, rename it agents archive, and let's change it to a post type archive and then add our condition to point it to the agent's post type. Let's go ahead and save and edit that in Breakdance. And for this, it's just going to be a very basic section with a post loop builder. Let's drop that in. And remember that card we created for our agents. This is where we're going to use that. So we'll choose our agent block. And you can see it's pulling in our agents and the dynamic data, but we do want to change the layout a little bit. We'll do a grid layout here, and we'll try 3 items per row. That might work since it is pretty wide. And we'll change to 1 item at tablet portrait. Now you can see our little contact accordions are working. We need a little extra space here in the bottom of this section. So let's try 128 pixels. We'll just step that up with our arrow key until it looks good. Now, of course, if you're using specific increments, you'll want to make sure that this aligns with that. Let's do 256. Perfect. So this is basically all we need for our basic agents archive. We could add some text, maybe a heading or something. Let's look at our library and see if there's anything that we want to include here. Let's go to Divine Real Estate, and we can even look on the home page to see if there are any sections we like. Let's drop that in. That looks pretty cool. We'll put it right up on the top of the page above our agents. And we'll do something like our agents are pros. And then these would be stats for the agents and then a list of agents. That looks pretty nice. So let's save that. And I always like to preview on the front end to make sure everything is going as expected. And you can see here, each one has their contact form with their specific contact information and a field with their email already populated inside of it. So this is a quick, easy way for folks to contact these agents. Now we get to move on to designing our single property template, which should be fun. Let's go back here and go back to WordPress. We need to add a new template. It's going to be for a single post. Let's change the settings to make sure it points at property post types. We'll say single property here. And then under location, we'll go to single properties and save that. Now we can go ahead and get started editing this single property template. So for this, we're going to jump over to the library again. Let's go down to our Divine Real Estate and go to single property. And we can actually just import this entire page. Now it is going to bring in another header and footer, which we do not want. So let's get rid of the header and then go down and make sure we get rid of that last footer section. And one more we don't want there. It looks like maybe this one. Let's get rid of that as well. Now we have our basic single property design. Let's make sure all of our dynamic data is being populated where it needs to be. So right here, we're going to get rid of this text element and we're going to change this to display the address. So let's change this text to dynamic data, property fields, and address. Perfect. This is already pulling the post title and this should be pulling the featured image. Yes. We'll say book a tour now. And the rest of this looks pretty good. Our form, of course, would need some adjustments depending on what you want out of this form. But for this example, this will work perfectly. And let's scroll down and see what else we have. I am going to get rid of this agents section here. We don't want those guys hanging out. We might use this area here in a minute, but let's see. Let's go ahead and swap this image for a gallery element here. Drop that in. And then we're going to want to change the images to come from our images field. So let's get rid of that. And now we have our property gallery. That looks pretty good. And then this has way too many properties for what we set up. So I'm going to get rid of that. We're going to kind of rebuild that section here. So let's grab this. Let's duplicate that and that. We'll move this kind of overline down there. And then we'll change this to wonderful perks. Change this overline to features. This is where we're going to showcase like bedrooms, bathrooms, that kind of thing. And the way we're going to do that is with another section from the library. So let's go through here. I believe it is located on our home page, perhaps. Let's go to home and let's look through here. There's a section with some icon boxes that I want to use here. This looks pretty good. I think we'll go ahead and use that. So let's drop this in and then we'll get rid of some of the stuff that we don't need like this. And we'll move this section up a little bit. So let's collapse that and see what we actually need to do. In fact, we want this div up a little bit under wonderful perks here. So this needs to go right there. And in fact, we don't even need this text area. So I grabbed the wrong element. Let's redo that. I believe we just need this div with the icon box. Move it right there. There we go. That's what we were looking for. And then we can get rid of this extra empty section here. And then we just need to update this to reflect our main property attributes that we want to display. So probably like acreage, square footage, and then maybe like bedrooms or something. So let's go ahead and do acreage for this first one. Let's see if we can find an icon of like hills or something or land. We'll just do that one for now. And we're going to change the title to a dynamic value. Let's go here to acreage. And then of course we will want to add an append here, acres. And then we could of course add some witty text right below this if we wanted to. Let's update this one to be square footage. So let's hit choose, something like that. And we'll do a dynamic value again, choose square footage, and then go in and add the append square feet and go ahead and close that out. And then finally, we can do number of bedrooms or something like that. So let's choose an icon, search for bed, and go ahead and swap that title out to a dynamic value. We'll do bedrooms and an append here again. And then below these icon boxes, we are going to want to add some spacing. So we'll do something like 40 pixels there. So that's a nice little display of the properties attributes, and you could add more to show like bathrooms and things like that. But in this case, I think that will do nicely. Now, finally, right below this description, I think I want a map element. Now, we'll probably have to add our Google Maps API key into Breakdance if we were doing this on a live site, but for now it should work, and we can actually enable this use without API key option if we need to. So let's go ahead and change the address to pull from the address field, and then let's adjust the size and make sure this is 100% width because I want it to span the whole section. And then, of course, 40 pixels of margin on the bottom to keep that spacing consistent. Now, one last thing I want to kind of sneak in here is to show the agent that is actually listing this property. I'm not sure exactly where I want to do it, so let's scroll through here and see. It might be nice to have it up towards the top, but it could get a little squished. So let's just use this area here and say listing agent, and then meet the agent, or just meet the, and then listing agent. And then what we're going to do is do a post loop builder, just like we did on the agent archive. We're going to choose the agent block, but then in the query, we're going to do a relationship query. So we can hit edit query. We can do ACF relationship since we used a relationship field, and we can choose listing agent. Let's apply that. And you can see that it's showing our listing agent with their contact information. Now that's a little wide, so let's rearrange this area a little bit. Let's add some columns, drop those in, and we'll do maybe 50-50. And then we can move this whole post loop builder down into the right side. And then we can move all this into the left side here. And that looks pretty good. Of course, that's not going to be expanded all the time. Let's get rid of that. And then let's make sure there's enough space below this gallery here, 40 pixels or so. And that gives people the ability to access the listing agent directly from the property itself. So as is tradition, let's jump to the front end and scroll through this really quickly. We have our title up here, address, a form to book a tour or whatever else you want people to contact you about there, a description, a map showing the location of the property, which is really nice, some perks or features of the property, our gallery with a nice light box effect, and then our listing agent right here near the bottom with an easy little drop down so that we can contact them either directly by phone, email, or via the contact form. Now we just have a couple other bits of design to wrap up, namely the home page and the contact page, and then we just need to run through the website, make sure everything works as expected, and we'll be pretty much done. So let's jump over to pages and get started on the final bits of this build. Let's go ahead and knock out the contact page first. So we'll just call this contact and go ahead and publish and then edit that in Breakdance. So this one should be relatively straightforward with a contact form and some text. I think we actually can probably use the library for most of this. So let's go down to Divine Real Estate and go to contact, and we probably can just import this whole page. And of course, let's get rid of anything we don't need. And we would of course need to update all the bits of information to make sure they're accurate, but the contact form already looks pretty good. I don't love that text there, so let's get rid of that. And the contact page is good to go. So let's go back and get started on the home page. We'll go back to WordPress here and add a new page, and we'll call it home. Let's publish that and then edit that in Breakdance. Now for the home page, we have a mostly complete home page design in the library. So once again, we're saving tons of time building this very complex site by using these designs from the library. So let's add this hero section. That looks great. Let's update this to say properties and point to the properties archive. Now let's grab another section from the library. Let's do this one. That looks fantastic, or it will once there's some content below it. Let's drop something else in here. How about this in case we offer some services or something like that? Go back to the library. Let's drop this section in. I like that quite a bit. And then let's see, maybe one more here. Let's do an agents area, but I think I want to customize it a little bit. So let's drop this whole section in, but we're going to get rid of most everything in here. Let's get rid of that, get rid of that whole columns element, get rid of that. We're going to keep the meet our agents, and then we're going to add some spacing to the inside of the bottom of this section. Let's do 256 to give us some room because of this cool overlap element there in the footer. Now these we want to get rid of. We could update these if we don't mind them being static, but I want to use our agent cards again here. So let's get rid of that, and let's add a post loop builder, and let's choose our agent block again. And let's go over here and make sure we have something like grid and maybe 3 items per row. And then of course we're going to have to adjust our query to make sure it's pointing at agents. So let's hit edit query. Post type, we're going to choose agents and apply. And just like that, we have all of our listing agents displayed right here on the home page. That looks pretty great. So let's save that, jump up to the front end, and we'll just have a click through to make sure that everything is kind of working as expected, our links aren't broken, that kind of thing. But before we do that, let's do one last thing here in the back end of WordPress. Let's go to settings, reading, and make sure that we have set a static home page here. We don't need a posts page because we're not going to have a blog at this point, but we might someday in the future and we can add it. So now if we go to our site, we see our home page here. We have our cool hero, our slider of logos, some services, some counters, our list of agents, each with their own little contact form, and then our footer. Now let's go up and go to properties. And this takes us to our properties archive, which you've already seen with our beautiful filtering and our property listings there on the side. And finally, we can go over to our agents, see our agents, contact each one of them. And then we have, of course, our contact page. So as you can see, this is a fairly robust, complete real estate site with some fairly advanced functionality, and it really didn't take very long at all to put this together using Breakdance, a couple of plugins, and the Breakdance design library. So that about covers how to build a fully featured real estate site using WordPress and Breakdance. Again, my name's Elijah, and thank you very much for watching.